The one NBA game that, as we're doing this live right now, that did go final on Tuesday, we saw the New York Knicks get the win, but no cover. What do you make of this series? Because coming in, I did think that this was going to be a series where the road teams had a chance to be able to seal a few games, be able to cover a lot, because with the Miami Heat, relatively solid road team, and the Knicks, as we know, were that as well. What did you make out of the first two games of the series, though, with the Heat being able to cover both?
I think odds makers have just a bad number on the total in both of these first two games. Now, I had to sweat out an over in game one that thankfully with a garbage bucket, depending on what number you got, I got 208. That thing landed on 209. The garbage bucket by R.J. Barrett at the end there pushed me over. But you're also talking about a game where the Knicks were flat out awful shooting threes. They shot 20% from three. They just kept chucking them up all over the place. And this was a game where they literally went a 77-73 game with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Both teams combined for 7 points the rest of the way in that third quarter. That's because the Knicks kept missing threes, and Miami shot 42%. And they did that with Jimmy Butler in the game, no less. And again, the odds makers, now you have Jimmy Butler injured, but odds makers, again, putting these totals around 206, 207. I just think they're way too low. I think both of these teams are going to be able to score. Now, it will be tough to handicap with Jimmy Butler being out and how much longer he'll be out if Miami can score. But I just don't think that they're in the right range. These should be closer to 210. I think you're getting some value here on the over if they keep these numbers down in the 205 area. And that's where we've seen tonight even the Heat can get to 100 without Jimmy Butler in the lineup because the Knicks will allow it to happen. And even though the Knicks shot a little bit better today from three, actually much better, as they were 40%, Miami's just a good team all around. And they're deep and they're well coached and they'll create shots. And so I'm going to continue to look for these low numbers coming as far as totals is concerned and continue to look the over. Once we get to Miami, I think you're going to start to see a lot more scoring.
Yep, and I felt like a lot of people were making a little bit too much out of playoff Jimmy Butler, the Heat culture, what have you, but we've seen it now. It's a 7-game sample size, and the Miami Heat, they have looked much different than they did in the regular season. So that has been very curious to take a look at. And, I mean, you mentioned it with the Jimmy Butler injury, and it really is a theme of 3 out of these 4 series. Really, other than the Lakers versus the Golden State Warriors series, all these injuries have been piling up for all these teams. In the Philadelphia 76ers series, it's Joel Embiid. They were able to seal game 1. We shall see what happens there. Chris Paul goes down in game 2 in Suns versus the Denver Nuggets. And out of all these injuries, I honestly do think that the Chris Paul's one is the most critical because while the 76ers are without a doubt not the same team without Joel Embiid, with the Phoenix Suns, they just have absolutely no depth whatsoever, and an injury to any of those 4 guys, for me, in my opinion, is just doomsday.
Well, Philadelphia can still shoot without James Harden on the court, and they can still make threes without Joel Embiid, on the court, and they could still make threes without Joel Embiid on the court. They proved that in game 1. They were a great shooting team all year long. But I think the biggest problem for the Phoenix Suns is, how much does Kevin Durant have to take over and put the ball in his hands? Because clearly, if the ball is in his hands, it's not in Devin Booker's hands, and it's not in DeAndre Ayton's hands, and it's not, in other guys' hands because Kevin Durant will be the guy who's asked to carry the load there and do most of the work. And I don't know how much distribution we're going to see. One thing about Kevin Durant that we saw, at least in the first series against the Clippers, he was incredibly efficient. And even though he had to play 40-plus minutes, they weren't a very laborious or tough 40-plus minutes because he had a lot of other help from guys on the floor as far as the scoring load is concerned. Now, Chris Paul isn't part of the scoring load, but the distribution load and where the ball goes, that's a big part of why the Suns were able to score as well as they did. So I think this is huge, but this is one of these moments here that we've knocked Kevin Durant for his entire career. If Chris Paul is out for the rest of this series or a considerable amount of time, can the Phoenix Suns get over the hump with Kevin Durant being the lead dog pulling the sled here against the number 1 seed in the West? It's one of those moments that we've been waiting to see Kevin Durant prove on his own. And if he can do it, then obviously it'd be a nice little feather in his cap, a little extra sort of revenge for all the people who doubted him for all those years. But, I mean, obviously it's not the NBA title, but still, knocking off the Denver Nuggets is no easy task.
No, it is not an easy task. And for the Philadelphia 76ers, as we've got Mark Zinno joining me right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. It was not an easy task to take down the Boston Celtics in Game 1, but they were able to do so. And we're seeing pretty much the same line right now for Game 2. You got to figure that Joel Embiid is going to be out of the fold. They're going to try to get him back when they shift this series back to Philadelphia. But right now seeing the Celtics as a 10-point favorite, this just feels a little bit too demonstrative in my opinion, because you brought it up a minute ago. With the 76ers, you still have shooters. DeAnthony Melton has to take over a little bit more than he would when Joel Embiid is out there on the floor, and it's a 76ers team that we know is going to lose the battle on the glass, but I just take a look at the way that the Celtics utilize their big man and didn't go to them enough, in my opinion, in Game 1. And if that's the game plan once again in Game 2, the 76ers have a chance to be able to hang in there and keep this within single digits, in my opinion.
I mean, it's kind of crazy that odds makers didn't move off this 9 or 10 line, and they're telling you they're baking in, obviously, Joel Embiid not playing, and maybe the Sixers are sitting here saying, we stole one, we'll be happy to go home with a split and get Joel Embiid back. I mean, that's probably the mentality here. And I hate laying this many points here, but this kind of feels like a rebound game for the Celtics and a beatdown headed for the 76ers. Here's what I would do in this game. I'll take the Celtics in the first half and lay the points, because while 10 may be a lot to cover, the Celtics, I expect them to start fast and not let Philadelphia believe they're going to hang in this game. And if they do that, they should have a sizable lead at halftime by 6 or 7. If this number's 5.5 or whatever, I mean, shop around, see what you can get. But that's the way I would play this. If the Celtics aren't going to cover at the half, I have a hard time believing that they're all of a sudden going to pull away by a massive number in the second half of this game. If the Sixers are hanging around because they're making shots, I wouldn't want to bank on the fact or bet on the fact that all of a sudden in the second half, guess what? The Sixers are just going to go cold for, 16 of 24 minutes in the second half and end up, taking a game that's a one-possession game like it was last time at half, and all of a sudden losing by double digits. For me, this screams take Boston in the first half and lay the points and get the heck out of Dodge.
And to your point right now, I'm seeing that first half line at 6 in most spots. I think I was seeing 1 or 2 straight 6.5s, but mostly seeing a 6. And then when it comes to the other series that we've already got numbers on for Friday as well, in the Nuggets versus the Phoenix Suns, I saw this open up at DraftKings with the Suns being a 5.5-point favorite. This appropriately has been bet down to 3.5, but even at the 3.5, I think that there's still a lot of value with Denver, because if Chris Paul does play, he's not going to be 100%, as we were alluding to a little bit earlier. And with this Phoenix Suns team, I just don't think that they're the world's greatest matchup against this Denver Nuggets bunch.
Well, I would tell you, I mean, again, I'll continue to jump on the under in this series, because I think we're not giving Denver's defense enough credit for how good they are. And we saw that in Game 2. Now, of course, the first game of the series went over, but that was because Denver decided to score 120 on their own, which is not exactly what I put in my handicap in the game. But I still think that if Phoenix is going to have a chance, they're going to have to limit Denver's scoring. They're going to have to keep Denver in that 105, 107 kind of range to have a chance to win this thing. If Denver can get to 110, 112, 115 in that range, I don't know that without Chris Paul that the Suns could keep up. Even with them, I don't know if they're designed to really be in that 115 range on the regular. So this is all about the Phoenix Suns defense for me. I'm going to continue to play the under in this series here until I see something that tells me otherwise. I just don't think that the Suns have enough firepower to be able to go bucket for bucket with a team like Denver, especially with Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, and who had, by the way, Porter Jr. had an awful game in Game 2 and still managed to make some clutch jumps, threes and jump shots down the stretch there to really ice that game for Denver. So, the only way for Phoenix to steal a game and win a game is to limit Denver defensively. And to me, that all equates to an under.
And I think that this would be an interesting scenario, too, if it's a relatively close game, or if the Phoenix Suns have a little bit of a lead going into the late third quarter, early fourth quarter, perhaps take a look at an in-game line on the Nuggets as well, because I do think that the lack of depth for the Phoenix Suns, that could catch up to them, and that could allow the Nuggets to be able to steal one as well.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.